Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Vanita D'Souza, your host for the day. Firstly, a big congratulations to all our exporters to help India achieve its ambitious target of 400 billion exports this week. This is a significant milestone which talks volume about how resilient Indian SMBs are. Today's webinar is organized to discuss one of the main pain points of the export sector, how to manage your logistics during uncertain times. We have invited Mr. Tej Contractor, Director of MCC Container Lines Pvt Limited, to share his expert opinions. Thank you for joining us today, Tej.
Thanks, Mr. Sousa.
Before we move forward, I would like to give you all a brief introduction to Drip Capital. Drip Capital is a global trade finance company offering post-shipment collateral-free financing to MSME exporters in India. Drip works with over 1,500 sellers and 900 buyers across 80 plus geographies. We have financed 2 billion worth of international trade since our inception in 2016. To know more about Drip Capital and to receive a call back from us, kindly fill the form that is shared in the chat section right now. A note to the audience, during the webinar, you can note down your questions. At the end of the webinar, we'll address all your questions. You will have the opportunity to raise your hand and ask the question directly to the speaker. Without any further delay, let's dive into today's session. US-China trade war followed by the COVID-19 pandemic derailed the global supply chain. In addition, due to the lack of workers across the supply chain resulted in congested ports, stalled ships, overloaded warehouses, delays, empty shelves, and eventually higher prices. Since the onset of the pandemic, freight costs have increased by over 400%. With the ongoing geopolitical tensions between Ukraine and Russia, and the recent lockdown in China has further stressed the global supply chain. In such uncertain times, logistics management will play a key role. To talk more on this, we have with us Tej today. Tej is the director of MCC Container Lines Pvt Limited. He's also a director at Transcargo India Pvt Limited and Mayur C Contractor Logistics Pvt Limited. He's also the president of Indian Institute of Freight Forwarders, the training arm of the National Association of Freight Forwarders and Customs Brokers in India. The program was started after he received validation from the International Association Vocational Training Body. This validation was achieved in 2004, and thereafter, every 4 years, it is revalidated. Apart from this, Tej is also a member of the advisory body Legal Matters, International Federation of Freight Forwarders. He's also a member of Federation of Freight Forwarders Association of India. His experience includes being a trainer at Bombay Customs House, Agents Association, and Indian Institute of Freight Forwarders. I now ask Mr. Tej to address our viewers. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa, for the lovely introduction. How is everybody today? Is everybody excited? Is everybody concerned? Is everybody surprised? Is everybody sleepy, hungry, not had your cup of coffee? Come on, write in the chat. Okay, great. Yes. Fine. All right. So that was it. This is a test just to see if you all are actually paying attention, or you just turned your screens on and you all are firing. You know, I'm just joking. So a good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank Megha, Rashmi, and the Drip Capital Management for giving me an opportunity to address such a wonderful audience today. Wow, Nikita, excited to learn. That's absolutely what we're looking forward to sharing today. So how has the last 2 years have been extremely challenging. How has this year been? So as Ms. D'Souza shared, India has achieved its target of $400 billion of exports, which we had set. It was an initiative and a push by the Ministry of Commerce, led by our none other than Mr. Goyal, and also our Prime Minister. We achieved that with 9 days to spare. So a great congratulations to every one of us. Further, the last 2 years was a challenge, especially if you were an astrologer or in the prediction business. because everything that we would never dream of actually took place. Do you all agree with me? If you all do, say yes or no in the chat box, please. Now, whilst you all do that, we all learn from our experiences. If you actually see, most of what we learn, most of what we predict is actually based on our experiences. To share with you, I'm a fourth generation logistician. So, I always say a joke that logistics is in my blood. Now, as kids, so we all have been very social as kids. And there is one very interesting thing, if you observe 2, 3, or maybe 4 young children sit together. So the first one will come with a story, right? And will say, this is what happened and this is what the outcome was. The other 2 are listening very keenly. Then the second one will say, do you know what happened? And the second story will start with an even better ending of the story. And both the other 2 are like, wow. Now the third one doesn't want to be left behind. So he or she will also come up with a story which is even better. Comfortably, I can tell each and every one of you are the third, because what you have seen in the last 2 years are unprecedented, and each of you will have a story to tell the future generation. So before we start our session, I would like to start with a poll. Okay. Now, I'm going to continue with this. I'm going to continue this poll for about 30 seconds. And before we start, there will be a second poll. That poll will set the precursor to the discussion. So I have just launched the poll. Can you all see the poll? So the poll goes, was your business affected by COVID? So it's a simple yes or no, or was it COVID proof? That means you were in the logistics business or the pharma business, one of the 2. Okay, so 90% were affected. All right. So we will take another 10 seconds more. Come on. All right. So 85% of the people were affected by COVID. 15 people were not. Oh, no one's business is pandemic proof. I think we should tell the hospitals, the testing, the RT-PCR testing facilities that, I think it proved what the industry was. Okay, so we are through with our first poll, 86% affected by COVID. Now, before we move to the second poll, one second. I can share the results. The second poll is a very strategic one, which will set the pace or the tone of today's session. The second poll it deals with how was your logistics business? Was it high rates? Was it lack of space? Or was it both? The reason this is significant is because in what we've seen taking place over the last probably 12 months is the lower ended commodities, like particle boards. If you have lower value goods, a lot of those trades have stopped. However, at the same time, we see a lot of essential supplies like food. We see grains. They are moving in a large way. All right. So we see about 60% of the people. I'll leave the poll open for another 5 seconds, and then we will close and share the results. 3, 2, 1. All right. So as you can see, 28% of you were left with high rates, 16 with no space, and 56 with both. Okay. All right. Now, today we are going to learn. With every session that we do, so with every session, we have something called learning objectives. The learning objectives will set the tone for what you will learn at the end of the session, and you can actually share your learnings to the rest of your colleagues and friends afterwards. So the first learning is what happened to my supply chain. So as we all know, supply chain disruptions were enormous in this period of time. So we will go through what happened to the supply chain. The second question which everybody asks, when is it going to end? Purely because we see again in the recent times, again a slight hiccup or a disruption coming in. The third is opportunities in international trade, such as the trade facilitation agreement and also trade agreements between two countries. How many of you actually know what the World Trade Facilitation Agreement is, or have you all heard of WTO? Just please go ahead and mention in the chat. Okay, so you've heard of the WTO and you know what the WTO TFA is. Excellent. Superb. And the last one is the most important, the most challenging C is compliance. Jokingly, I keep on telling everybody that it's actually contractors. So if you ever need help, you can reach out to me and we will make sure that your compliance woes go away. One thing, so Mr. Chinnaswamy says, heard about WTO FTS. So Mr. Chinnaswamy, it's actually two different things, but by the end of this session, you will be an expert in both. Do not worry. All right. So through the end of this session, you will go through and learn what are the opportunities available as well, because we all not only look at challenges, but we also should find little gold mines wherever we go. I must congratulate all of you for making it here. Otherwise, I would be talking to myself. As any teacher wishes, they want to pass on knowledge to the next generation or the audience. The key is that every student who learns wants or must want to be taught. So it's very important. All of us, we put on our student hats. So these concepts will go into a long-term memory and will be with you for a longer period of time. Before Amazon, Santa taught us nothing. Before Amazon, Santa taught us that shipping is free. However, in totality, nothing comes free in life except for this and other webinars by Drip Capital. We, at a young age, we learn that there is nothing free, but yet we jump at an opportunity when we find something lucrative enough. So please remember, anything that you do, anything that you move will come at a cost. The LCL business in our shipping space has been largely of a space where rates have been zero. And just remember that nothing is free. So make sure you look at all your contracts clearly. Today, we thank every one of you, as each and every one of you is the economy. India's exporters, you are India's exporters, and you are the reason that exporters, you are the reason that our country is progressing, and also the reason that I have a job. Further, India is positioned to be one of the biggest economies going further. I'm sure all of you know that India exports two kinds of products. One is goods and one is services. As you can see, this is a comparative analysis of what trade statistics of India are over the last decade or so. The services surplus stands at about, the services export business in 18-19 stands at about $205 billion. And the merchandise, which is the trade, which is the goods, it stands at 18-19 at about $331 billion. Coming to latest figures just came in a few days ago. Congratulations, India achieved 400 billion. This was the target set by the government. And the next target is $1 trillion. How we are going to achieve this, in spite of the pandemic, in spite of all the resources, challenges, etc., we still are on a path to grow. And if you look at the numbers between 2019-20 and 2020-22, sorry, 21-22, you are looking at close to over a 20 odd % growth, which is an achievement and a feat for all of us. 2020 was a game changer for everyone. It has been 2 years since. However, what we have seen in these 2 years is nothing but extraordinary. The cost of shipping has been the primary focus of everybody. As exporters, the cost of shipping jumped as high as 15% of the value of goods. In certain cases, even higher. Before this, what was earlier, before this, we evaluated costs. The cost of shipping or logistics was negligible. Why was this brought about? Why does it still continue, and when it is going to end? Is the objective, it is the objective of business owners or logistics team members to stabilize their supply. Over the last 18 months, and even so recently, we've seen the prices of commodities, raw materials, products skyrocket. Forget anything, even essential items like sugar, salt, rice, those too have had a big impact. If there is stability, everyone can predict the supply. So I was talking and interacting with a few exporters, and they said, we don't have a problem with the rates going up. However, if the rate goes up today, by the time we take the order and ready to ship, it has gone up again. So the uncertainty is what causes a challenge for us. And as you can see, the numbers that you see that India has achieved, in spite of all the challenges, the business or goods have moved. While I go ahead, I would like to check with another poll. What are the challenges, or what are the kind of, one second, sorry, I'll just get the poll out. We would like to see how challenging an environment your logistics has become. Has it been very challenging? Has it been challenging, or you have been able to manage it? Okay, I see everybody is with me, so nobody needs a cup of coffee to take their, keep them awake. All right, so we have a balance between, so there are no takers for, not challenging. We have about a 60-40 ratio between challenging and very challenging. Okay, so we'll end the poll in 3 seconds, and then I will share it with you. All right, so here are the results on screen. So let's understand what took place and what happened. A lot of you may have seen it already. However, I'm here to give you a very different and interesting perspective of what there is. So we all know there was the pandemic caused by COVID-19, which were followed by lockdowns. In the lockdowns, we saw only essential services moving. There was limited manufacturing. Since there was no manufacturing trade, it never made sense for carriers to call or go to vessels. So it was the first time in history where shipping lines were forced to slow steam or have blank sails. Because imagine if you have materials, or if you have a vessel going from point A to point B, but no one to load or no goods to load, it would actually be a huge cost to them. So the challenge to shipping lines was that how do we maintain the supply? It is impossible to stop the supply. How would we maintain the supply? If they would have continued, they would have amplified their losses, and it would have been a much larger or different scene than it came. Then came the kicker. In order to revive economies, countries started giving economic stimulus to industries. In India, we received, like as businesses, we received economic stimuli. However, in other countries, there was participation by the government in terms of, sorry, support for their salaries or growing the business for marketing to add, more resources in place. And in certain countries, they actually just printed and gave money to the citizens to ensure that the economy revives. Sorry. Now, what was the outcome? The outcome was this resulted in pent up demand. And the demand was so significant, all right? Imagine while 1/3 of the world was locked up, certain economies were open. And we saw that because there was relief measures given, rather than people going and spending money on other items, people, or maybe a holiday or a travel or a shopping, people started buying goods. I think the online space got its most significant boost during this time. Okay. Further, if you had saved for a year, after about 6 months, a lot of countries started unlocking in some way or the other. So and since there was limitation with flights, people started spending on other things. So you had, any holiday costs you at least 3-4 lakh rupees. So instead of that, you would spend that money in buying products, goods. I'll tell you a story of, I'll share a story of someone I was talking to. So they actually decided to redo the flooring of their house. They didn't need to do it, but they redid it just because they had additional money to spend. Further, they had a television, which was probably a 55-inch television. They went and upgraded to a 80-inch television because of the additional disposable income they had. So this was the challenge that came in. The last thing that really caused the disruption, last thing was infrastructure challenges. If you see, when ships started finally moving, so earlier the problem was that ships slow steamed or did not move, so they reduced capacity. Often, we have this misconception कि मेरे को container नहीं मिल रहा है या मेरे को rate नहीं मिल रहा है क्योंकि vessel कम हो गई है. Going further, I will actually show you that is not the case. The main problem of why the rates remained high is the infrastructure challenges. Okay. Now let's put things in perspective on how we understand them and why they happened. I have taken this trade lane specifically. I have taken the North America as a region because the demand in North America increased so high, it actually created a ripple effect everywhere else in the world. So also North America and Europe are two of our largest trading partners. Now, earlier you had a vessel going to US, going one way, it would be about 21 to 23 days. And you would need approximately, assuming a week call, about 3 vessels to 4 vessels to meet its requirement to complete its rotation. Further, the vessels would come back around in a similar period of time. So on an average, it would be about 60 days for the vessel to complete its rotation. Okay. If any of you will have a question or so whilst in conversation, please just go ahead and type it in the chat. Okay. Now let's look at what happened during COVID. And I'm not taking, I've specifically not taken a particular time frame. Like for example, when when Ever Given was stuck in the Suez, or a particular month where there was an abnormal transit. But I have taken a general statement during COVID. So in some cases, it could be more or some cases less. Now, what happened is during COVID, when vessels started calling, we had challenges in ports. So the vessel reached a port and it was mandatory for all crew to get, RT-PCR tested. So at some point, some crew picked up COVID, and in certain countries, vessels were isolated for 14 days, some 7 days. Some the crew was isolated, but the vessel continued on, and so on. Now, what happened is that the transit delays caused the vessels to get disrupted. Now, as we know, if you have one car which is stuck in the middle of the road, maybe due to a breakdown, automatically there is a traffic jam created. Thankfully, 70% of the world is sea, and you can move around that, except when you're in the Suez Canal, and that we've also learned. So the vessel loop, which was 22 or 23, sorry, which was about 60 days going round trip, landed up to over 90 days. Because when vessels reach destination, like for example, you see a vessel reach the east coast or the west coast and had to wait for a few days to offload. So where they would immediately berth, they had to kind of take longer to berth. Okay, that created additional challenges and reduced capacities. Right. Now, the main areas of the congestion were US East and West Coast specifically, in addition to the other ports. However, the West Coast became so challenging that it was disruption and transit delays were up to 30%, up to 30 days. In some exceptional cases, even 40 days for a vessel to load. And as you see, in China, there is huge capacity. China also had at one point in time almost a 16-day delay in loading. India is a huge trading partner. India exports like the world. India imports a lot from China. We saw vessels getting delayed by anywhere between 7 to 10 days on an average, and in certain cases even beyond. What the shipping lines started doing, they started moving capacities from Asia and from other segments to the Trans-Pacific trade lane. The Trans-Pacific trade lane is between China and USA. I even know of one carrier that actually started doing business in this region, okay, maybe with Africa, with some with the Middle East. They stopped all the business because they started, moving cargo towards US purely because the rates that they received from the US were much higher. So here you could see the opportunities and how that whole scene diversified. So carriers started moving capacity. So imagine you have a 10,000 TEU vessel running on a particular trade lane. Now 5 of your vessels are already stopped, or blocked over 30 days. You need to have more. So you will immediately pull out vessels from other services. And a ship is not something like, chutki bajaya naya ship ban gaya. So whilst the shipping lines were earning money, the shipyards along the same time also reduced, and new supply has been booked. I will go into further slides to tell you how much and what is going to happen later. In this slide, you will actually see the crisis on a single page, and it will really give you an understanding of what has taken place. So as I mentioned, that the biggest challenge was when the pandemic happened, that shipping lines had to slow steam or conduct or do blank sailings. In this index, you will see first, number one is where China locked down. Okay, so there was a huge, tremendous drop in capacity supply over which was on sea. So what you see on the matrix is the container capacity that is in sea, not that is standing land side. Okay, so any container or the number of containers that are in sea are listed in this graph. In the second part, you can see in the second and third, you can actually see the shipping lines have added capacity, and it is more capacity than what was there. So all of the pent up demand that was there opened up towards the end of August. Okay, and we saw a huge shift in people wanting to move containers. I will tell you, we had a shipment. It was a large project cargo going into Africa. Booking 43 days in advance. That is, we barely could get the number of boxes that we require. So you can see the situation became so challenging. But that was not because ships were not calling, and that was not because there were no containers. The container capacity increased, however, the demand was more than the supply. In the fourth season, so that's November to February 2020, 2021, you saw a huge challenge as far as, reduced gaps. So when ships started moving, the land side supply started failing. So you had ports built in with certain capacities. Now, if you asked to do 2 or 3 times that capacity, it is almost impossible for infrastructure to cope that fast. Therefore, we saw a lot of things getting delayed. Now, to add woes to that, we saw the Ever Given, which was stuck in the Suez Canal. And you can see a big V, right? So in April, whilst the Ever Given was stuck, container capacities or shipping, which was about pre-COVID levels. I'll just try and highlight it and annotate it one second. So we saw where container capacities were more or less around COVID level when the Ever Given was stuck, there was a huge drop. So almost 1.5 million TEUs, which kind of went out of supply because of that. And it came back quickly, but that too was a challenge. And from then till now, we are seeing that the container capacities on sea are actually dropping. Since they are dropping, okay, the equipment supply is not coming back. So the containers are not coming back. You're not able to utilize them. With this, we expect for a short period of time, there may be additional challenges which are around the corner. We are already seeing a little bit of stress in certain trade lanes where it is taking 2 to 3 weeks to get containers. Like East Africa is one sector which is perpetually plagued right now. Then you have some countries in the West going into US, into Europe, where there are certain challenges. So it's important that you plan your supply effectively. Now, you are an expert on discussing what happened with the supply, okay, or what happened to my supply chain. Now let's discuss when it will end. The shipping crisis is not going to come to an end. I'm just joking. Like all good things come to an end, this too shall pass. However, there are certain factors in achieving this. So the question is, how quickly it will come to an end depends on these factors. There are 3 primary factors which are there. The first is reduction in demand. I've had a lot of exporters talk to me saying, the rates have gone up. They are at 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 levels. However, we are still seeing at these levels also, suppliers are placing orders. If buyers are placing orders. If buyers are placing orders and the continued container supply reduces, that is certainly not going to make it easy for the crisis to end. So if we see proper reduction in demand, that would be the start of the end of the shipping crisis. Second is blank sailings. Shipping lines are also smart. They have seen that at these levels also trade can move. So it is possible that they might look at additional blank sailings to ensure that the rates remain at a slightly higher position. It's not that it's going to go back to pre-COVID levels, and it's not going to remain at they are or where they are today. However, there will be a rationalization in that space. And just to be fair to the shipping lines, if you actually saw a graph of shipping company financials from 2008 to 2017, you'd actually see maybe 1 or 2 years where they made money, and it's very little money. All the rest of the years, they actually lost money. So although I don't appreciate, I don't support the rates where they are today, shipping at $200, $300, $400 also, put us in a position today where we are, because where we had 22 shipping lines or major shipping lines earlier, you have only about 10 left today. The second most important thing is the infrastructure. Infrastructure is an extremely relevant point. If you were importing during the lockdown, do you know customs was swamped? because eventually vessels have to offload, and vessels have to offload containers. And at that time in the lockdown, we saw that containers were not getting evacuated. Because they were not getting evacuated, it put a strain on the ports. It put a strain on the availability of supply. In the US, they have actually went ahead and offloaded empty yards, offloaded containers in different yards. So we must appreciate that customs and other governments have also tried to adopt and move around to reduce the supply, reduce the impact of the crisis. However, the infrastructure that is there behind it has to change. And with the significant amount of money that carriers and certain people have made in this last 2 years, we should see a tremendous boost in capacity. Already shipping lines have made a lot of money and they have deployed a lot of money in ensuring there's additional capacity. Start of the additional capacity comes in at the end of this year. So by 2022 all the way till 2024, we are going to see a significantly large amount of capacity being introduced. I still remember an article, as ships became bigger and bigger. Earlier you had smaller ships, 2, 3, 5,000 TEU vessels. As ships became bigger, we would call it the floating cities. You had some of the largest vessels being as large as 5 or 6 football fields. Okay, now that's a significant size. So there was an article which said, are ships too big? This was probably around 2018, where the ships were so large that the ports, it could only call a limited number of ports. We will see, in my opinion, ships increasing. Now we will see an emphasis on infrastructure spend also. If you see certain locations or certain countries realize that the availability of their ports were very limited. So if you look at the west coast of North America, there is a port called Prince Rupert, which is above Vancouver. Prince Rupert became extremely interesting a port to call. Why? Because it would actually ensure that your goods got offloaded. And from Prince Rupert, they were ferrying containers back to Seattle or some places. This is the kind of dynamic changes which people adapted to. The good news to all of you is that the rates are expected to decline probably in the next quarter or post the next quarter. So starting September or so, see right now, the contracting season across the globe is on. So, US contracts are filed. There are other contracts which are filed in place as well. We would expect that going further, rates would drop, and they would drop at decent levels. It's not that it would drop only 5-10%. Personally, I expect them to be about 50% lower than what they are today. However, I'm not someone who can. I have been proven wrong a couple of times in this lockdown, but as long as your supply reduces, as long as your demand reduces and supply increases, we should see a big change. Now we've already seen the asset side. We've seen the point of view of shipping, what's going to happen. We've seen a tremendous increase in goods. Now here, this slide talks about the demand recovery. If you see in 2020 Q3, there has been almost a 30% increase in trade, and this is only North America. So we have seen increase in all regions. Although global shipping supply reduced, so we saw the shipping supply in containers reduce in the earlier slides. However, in the case of demand, and demand continues to be strong. We've always heard demand growing at 2, 3, 5%, right? Here you are seeing demand growing at 20%. However, supply at the same time has reduced. So therefore, there is a gap. And as you can see, a gap of 20% growth and a capacity reduction of 10%, it only increases the challenges that we face. It's very important for you to know that. Now, this will actually work and it will actually start getting decongested once the equipment starts getting evacuated. We have already seen the worst has gone. We are seeing a large number of evacuations taking place in all countries around the world. So fortunately, we don't have something like this happening in India. So containers is not the issue, evacuation is not the issue. However, in certain countries, we have huge challenges like East Africa. We're seeing every vessel shipping. So this week a vessel will call, next week will not call. Why? Because the ports are congested and the containers are not getting evacuated. Now, if the ports are congested, how many containers can you move, right, to a location? Recently, as recent as this morning, there are certain cargo moving from certain regions in Africa have been suspended. Why? Because they are expecting, that they are not taking any more bookings, because if they accept more bookings, the goods will lie at certain locations or certain ports and they would have challenges. Capacity, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, is going to increase. There is going to be about 20% increase in capacity, which will be delivered over the next 2 years. So we should see a significant reduction in the challenges of supply chain. We have all heard of the Great Resignation. The lockdown has really made life very challenging for people, and a lot of people have gone to doing freelancing. Goods is something that is never going to move online. They have to physically move from one place to another, and that is done by people. Goods lying in warehouses. Hence, the labor shortages have amplified the challenges in landside logistics. These labor shortages, once they reduce, will also have a huge impact on business. So now you know what are the challenges and what took place. Let's look at the opportunities. Now, how many of you are exporting to Asia? Can you please just type in the chat box? How many of you are exporting to Asia? So, Mr. Sailal Singh Akwana. Okay. Now, let me tell you, if you are exporting, there are huge opportunities which lie. A lot of people get disappointed because, okay, India first used to get drawback, abhi drawback itna kam ho gaya GST आने से पहले, GST आने उसके बाद MEIS मिलता था, MEIS मेरे को 2% 5% मिलता था, अभी तो कुछ नहीं मिलता है या 1-0.5% मिलता है. People have gotten used to subsidies, and I'll tell you the textile industry was surviving because they were getting a 10% subsidy. All of a sudden, the government took that away. Okay. Now I know a huge exporter who actually shared that a lot of the exports was done at cost and they would live on subsidies. However, what they didn't realize is that 6 months before, the government said that these subsidies will go. So paying attention to what is going on is extremely relevant. One significant aspect of growth is trade agreements. Okay. I did a session for someone in 2012. While everyone was looking at doing trade with Europe, when Europe grows at 2%, 3%, if you looked at intra-Asia trade grew at 30%. Why? Because there was an agreement between India and the ASEAN countries. Now, can you imagine? I know somebody who was exporting only to, say, USA at X price. They started exporting to Malaysia. Now, yes, imagine exporting garments to Malaysia. He said that I'm getting more money if I export to Malaysia than I'm getting to US. Now, this happened because the world or the movement of goods was under a trade agreement. Okay. Most trade agreements are preferential and free trade agreements, okay, which are there to reduce tariffs. So when someone imported from China into Malaysia that same product, it was say 10% duty or maybe 20% duty. However, this company exported from India and it was duty free. So when the item went from India, there was a 10% benefit. Okay. Now I will come to trade agreements once again. A few of you mentioned you know about the World Trade Facilitation Agreement, correct? 2 or 3 people mentioned. Do you know how it is going to change the game? It is going to standardize trade. The WTO is not a new concept. It has been around for a long time. It was earlier the GATT agreement, okay, which is now changed to WTO. Now the TFA is significant. It was finally closed in 2013 in December and it came into force in February 2017. What it does, it speaks about simplification of exports and imports and transit cargo. Okay. Further, it asks for advance rulings. If I am a person who wants to import, say, steel into your country or into another country, I can approach the government and say, this is what I want to, bring in. Please tell me what these products are. These products, can you tell us the rate of duty and whether our classification is correct? If the ruling is given, no customs department can challenge that later on. Further, it talks about advanced arrivals or advanced manifests also. Advanced filings. So those of you who are doing imports in some way, you have seen advanced filing and you've heard about manifests. All of these come from the WTO TFA. Further, if you look at the compliance portal, so the government of India has a compliance portal. You can see publication of trade rules is also a function of the WTO TFA. Further, the WTO TFA does not talk about just government to government relationship. It talks about relationship between customs and also relationship between allied agencies. So you have something called the certificate of origin, which is issued between 2 countries. You have the phytosanitary certificate issued 2 countries. The phytosanitary is not issued by usually the indirect tax indirect tax authority in each country. It is issued by another authority. However, they are bringing in measures to simplify things. A significant part of the WTO TFA is a National Committee on Trade Facilitation. India has made significant progress in the WCO and in the WTO. If you as an exporter have a challenge or a problem, if you bring it to the department or to the government, they will certainly hear you out. You can, as an exporter, take advantage of the WTO in other countries. So if you are exporting to USA, if you are exporting to Germany or the European Union, they have facilities where you can actually analyze things. So you can also find tariffs online, which can help you price products at some point in time. Okay. Further, let's talk about India's free trade agreements. So I spoke about 2 typical agreements which are there. One is the free trade agreement and one is the preferential trade agreement. So India has about 10 trade agreements. Okay. So 10 free trade agreements. Now, these free trade agreements actually have started and have increased trade significantly across regions. So goods produced in India and moving to these countries, or goods produced in those countries or moving to India, certain goods have free duty in India. Certain goods have a preferential duty in India. So it is very important for you to analyze when you are bringing products. I will tell you, there are so many companies who import being unaware of this. And if you do, you are losing out. There are so many countries who just export their goods. However, they do not know what advantage does India get when importing into the country. That sets price competitiveness of goods. Further, moving into the preferential trade agreements that we have about 7 preferential trade agreements, and starting with the Asia Pacific Trade Agreement, which was formerly known as the Bangkok Agreement. So earlier there was a there was an early harvest scheme with the bank known as the Bangkok Rules, but that kind of transitioned into the Asia Pacific Trade Agreement. Then the GSP is something that everybody knows about. SAARC as a region, there's a preferential agreement. India, Afghanistan, India, MESCO. So MESCO is Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Venezuela is also a part of it. However, currently it is suspended. And eventually Chile. So if you are exporting products into these regions, if you analyze what are the opportunities that exist for you in those regions, it could be something of great significance. Okay. The latest and the most historic agreement. So there is something now, I spoke about FTAs and PTAs. You also have something called CIPAs and SICAs. So CIPA is a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. A partnership agreement is larger than a trade agreement. Trade agreement only talks about goods. CIPA talks about, investments, services, commerce, government to government interaction, etc. The significance of the India-UAE CIPA agreement is all of the other agreements that we see, we have signed with manufacturing countries. India and UAE, so UAE is not a manufacturing country. Further, UAE is the second largest trading partner of India. What is significant is that it is an 880-page document which was signed in 88 days. Now, here is the kicker. $26 billion worth of goods of Indian products will be imported in the UAE duty-free. Today, there is a 5% duty for products moving into the UAE. 97% of the products moving from India will be zero duty. Now, that is the opportunity that exists. The current trade is $60 billion, and it is expected to increase to $100 billion in the next 5 years. And this is just to the UAE. That is what the expectation and target is. The access, so if you look at traditionally also, Dubai or UAE has been the place where everybody, where Africa and a little bit and the Middle East meet to do business. Having this agreement in place will allow access to the GCC and the African markets, which are also extremely large markets and are a great opportunity for exporters from India. UAE is not too far. It is very similar. I will tell you, we were just there a few days ago. Starting Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we have an agreement which India and UAE have signed, which is the CIPA. They even held a conference, like Federation of Indian Exporters, FIO, actually held a conference there in order to promote the CIPA. And we had people from the governments of both countries, and we had commercial officers talk about increase in promotion of business between these two. So please take advantage of something like this. Now, compliance and how to choose a service provider. This one point will actually make and break your trade. So when we had the earlier 60%, more than 60% said that they have challenges with their logistics. Let me tell you, if you dealt with someone who was compliant and someone who was predictable, you would actually have, I mean, it's not that you wouldn't have challenges. However, your challenges would be mitigated to a large extent. Okay, let's find out why. Now, if you look at the big C is compliance. If you look at the last, from 2014 onwards, we have seen GST, we have seen additional compliances that are brought in. The government has been very clear, saying that, listen, we want you to do things once. We will not allow you to do it again. So if you make a mistake in GST, sorry, you lose the credit, unless you go to appeal and win it. The same way, we have seen an increase in governance or regulations across. So if you look at purchase and sales, self-sealing, and compulsory custom requirements. So these are extremely relevant if you are importing or if you are exporting. If you do not export correctly, you will be in for a surprise later on. So please make sure that, I mean, it was almost 3 months, 25% of the documents around the country were stuck because they made some mistake or the other. Further, with the increasing regulations of goods and service tax, self-assessment and premises-based audit. So for those of you who do not know, premises-based audit is that the customs department earlier had access to come only if there was a challenge. Like how income tax audits you or central excise audits you, in a similar manner, the customs will also audit you. So it's very relevant for you to put things in order. This Comet Regulations, those of you who are exporting items which can be used for the wrong reasons. Comet Regulations is a big area which could impact you as an exporter, and it could cause you would have severe consequences if you don't follow them. Those of you who are importing or exporting, there is something called the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and that is something that is significantly being taken up by all countries. In fact, the OFAC countries are even monitoring transactions where there is only a paper transaction. So unless and until you have a physical presence, you have to prove that. Otherwise, both the countries where the eventual owner resides would get rights to try those cases. Valuation rules, intellectual property rights, classification. So if you are compliant and if you know the rules, you will not have problems. And the rules keep on changing. So it's very relevant for you to be on top of this. So compliance is extremely, extremely important. Okay. Now let's understand what is customs. It's very relevant because I'm setting the tone and context for how to choose a service provider. If you look at customs, when we travel, customs basically asks you, what are you doing here? Why are you here? How long will you be here? And do you have anything to declare? Okay. Going by my first story, except for Santa Claus, who gets an opportunity to fly over, all of the others actually have to follow customs. Now, the role of customs is not just revenue collection. The customs enforces, it implements trade agreements, it protects our community against wrongdoing, it upholds trade policy, it audits. So I mentioned auditing earlier. It gives trade statistics and it protects our borders. Okay. Most people who really understand, or most people who really do not understand customs, okay, have an impression that this is how customs works. However, what you must realize and understand is that this is not the way customs works. Customs works on compliance. Only if you are compliant, you'll have problems. We'll go for a quick question. Do you think customs or international trade is difficult in India? Let me tell you, it is only difficult if you are not compliant. If you are compliant, goods get cleared in a matter of hours. If you indulge in wrongdoing, let me tell you, earlier you had zero visibility. Okay. Once the goods were cleared, imports or exports, it was gone. Now, from where you buy, let's talk in the context of exports. You may buy material from a small place in Varanasi and you are exporting it to the highest end store in Paris. The government can actually tell you where you have bought it from, what was the stock of that guy, what you have got, how much stock you have, how much you have exported, and they can track that all the way up to Paris. Okay. So if you indulge in wrongdoing, you are setting yourself up to be like the fish that is about to fly. And we all know fishes can't fly. Right? Are you all enjoying the session so far? If you all are, just say yes in the chat. Super. Okay. Now we come to a logistics service provider, and I promise you, I'm going to give you the actual secret. Okay. So when I was in, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a 4th generation logistician. Okay, and I was always the most outstanding student. Okay, by outstanding, I always stood outside. I was never inside class. So when I finished my graduation, I said, I am done. I don't have to study anymore. You know, like how we always feel. Then I realized that I entered this business. Do you know, as a logistician, what I read in probably 15 years of my life, I have to read every year and to upgrade that knowledge. As a logistics service provider, you are required to know the customs laws. And let me tell you, there are thousands of pages. You are required to know the allied acts. Allied acts are, for example, acts of other ministries. So if you want to export, for example, a hazardous product, how do you control or export that? If you want to export a textile, or if you want to export tea or coffee, you need to know the relevant rules of the tobacco board, the tea board or the coffee board, or if you're doing tobacco, the tobacco board, excise and other excise in case of alcohol and etc. So it's relevant that a logistics service provider knows that regulation. Further, insurance. Just a few days ago, I was telling somebody there was a shipment which moved from point A in Europe to point B in Europe. Okay. The cargo eventually was stolen, so it disappeared in connivance with the transporter. The insurance company denied the claim. They denied the claim because the Incoterm used was a wrong Incoterm. Now, this company has 26 offices in the world. Each office does between $200,000 to $400,000 of business every day. Okay, and they were using the wrong term. If you have a problem, okay, it is extremely relevant for you to understand who your service provider is and work with the right service provider. If you don't, like for example, on the right side of the screen, you see insurance transport regulations. Okay, what are the transport regulations in India? Let me tell you, you bring a good for export. Okay, now here is a realization. Let's assume you are picking up the cargo. Let's say you are from an ICD. So let's say Ahmedabad or Delhi, and you are in a Concord zone. If you pick up the equipment or the goods and the goods break, if you don't insure them, you are liable to get insurance at a measly rate, which is, if I'm not wrong, it was 50 rupees a kilo. So can you imagine you have a 100 kilo package, which is worth, maybe 5 lakh rupees or 10 lakh rupees. However, you will get back only 5,000 rupees if you don't take insurance. If your goods go by air and they disappear, what is your recourse? These are extremely important subjects. Let me tell you. I will tell you an instance, and here is the classic case of, half knowledge is dangerous. One customer exported goods to Ethiopia. When they exported goods to Ethiopia, they asked the clearing agent, so the goods reached the destination. The buyer refused to pick up unless and until 50% discount is given. Okay. Now, the exporter goes and asks his clearing agent, saying, "Arey, मेरे को दूसरा buyer मिल गया है. Can you please allow me to, go with that buyer?" So immediately the clearing agent says, "Yes, sir, it's possible." Do you know what happens in that case? So typically this was the case of a person who is supposed to give advice. However, the person is giving wrong advice. And it is very much like what you see. It is a child in the photograph where the person who is giving the advice is learning from mistakes of the customer. Let me tell you, if something like this happens to you, it will prove to be extremely costly. Extremely costly. That customer had to realize that there is RBI regulations, there is customs regulations, there is international shipping regulations, there is custom regulations in destination. Only if all these regulations are met or understood, then advice can be given. So please re-evaluate who you work with. I will just take 5 more minutes, and I'm sorry I ran a little bit over time, but you have been an amazing audience. So I hope that is okay, Ms. D'Souza.
Yes, sir, that's okay.
Thank you. Now, when you deal with a logistics service provider, okay, you should deal with authorized logistics service providers. They must be registered with customs. Mr. Srivastava, you can contact me offline. I'll tell you the solution, or you can ask the question, and I will give you a basic precursor on how to arrive at a solution. So, I'm seeing a lot of people who work with logistics providers. They are not registered. Do not work with them. Let me tell you, the day you land yourself in trouble, you will have problems. You should be experienced and knowledgeable. You should understand the law. You should be able to identify what the problem is. I'll just give you one line, RODDEP, which replaced MEIS. Everybody thought, क्या फर्क पड़ता हमको, MEIS जाएगा, RODDEP आएगा. MEIS was an incentive from the government. So if you had 100 rupee product, you will get 5 rupees. RODDEP is a remission scheme. If you are importing goods and if you are exporting and there has been tax, it is a remission scheme to return the duty applicable or paid during the course of manufacture. So imagine you have an incentive and you have a remission scheme. They are two completely different things. And this was released 18 months before it happened. However, we saw a huge number of exporters did not see this coming, and they did not realign their pricing. The service provider should have insurance. Let me tell you, as an organization, I have liability insurance. Tomorrow, if there is a problem which occurs, you should be secure. You should be able to have recourse. Okay, and when you're dealing with a company who is doing shipping for you as well, they should be a registered multimodal transport operator. India has a law which is called the Indian Multimodal Transport of Goods Act. Before I start each year, okay, so we are about to hit April 1st, okay. Before I wake up and I go to work and I earn money, I already have to pay insurance, I already have to pay my registration, I already have to make sure that my compliance is in place. So as an organization, I have to be compliant. If an organization I am not compliant, how am I going to make sure that my customers are compliant? Okay, that is extremely relevant. It is a case of the Japanese AEO. In Japan, what the customs have done there, they have said we don't want exporters and importers to be emphasized and put pressure on the AEO. Japan has said we want the logistics provider to be AEO, so automatically the compliance passes on to the exporter or importer. Now, the reason why you are all here, and I'm saving the best for last, choose wisely who you work with, and you will beat not only this crisis, but all crises. Okay. Plan your shipments. You must plan. So I will share with you, we do work for one customer. That customer moves cargo to one sector. Okay. Their cost has gone up from X to 4X in terms of the price of the goods. However, because we have planned in advance, okay, we have been able to meet almost 95% of their supply. 5% is a challenge. However, we were able to secure, ensure that the shipments move. If you use and talk to a service provider, they will find you special situations, and these special situations will save you money. All of a sudden, you will get an opportunity to move cargo. Like, for example, you have a challenge that is going to occur in USA. Move cargo to Mexico and go through Mexico to USA. These are real life cases. We, unfortunately, another case now, but we used to move cargo. Everyone used to move cargo into Russia from St. Petersburg predominantly, and also through Riga. And it would go into Moscow. As an organization, we moved cargo from Ukraine, from Odessa port, we moved to Moscow and we brought it back. And it was cheaper than that also. So this was a special situation that we could do. Why? And it worked extremely well, especially in the winter. Because in the winter, the north ports would develop ice and there would be huge challenges. So you will find special situations. Today, if you are importing, you can import goods at least a 10% discount. Okay. These are special situations available. It has been up for some time. So many people are not taking advantage of it. Imagine we all fight for 1%, 0.5%. However, when you have special situations which you can take advantage of, you will not even know about them. Build relationships. I am extremely fortunate to build relationships with my customers. However, I see a lot of people are transactional. So instead of dealing with an organization, they will look at price. $5 diya, shift karo. $500 rupiya change kiya, shift karo. I'll tell you, we had one company who worked with us in the past. They shifted business to someone else for maybe 500-600 rupees a container. After a year and a half, I got a call from the owner saying that, listen, do you know this one in this shipping company? So we said, yes. He's saying, I used to deal with someone who does exports. मतलब वो suitcase वाला आदमी था. He never did imports. अभी मेरा माल reject हो गया, वापस आ गया. Reject होके वापस आ गया. अभी मेरे को 4 लाख रुपए देना है शिपिंग लाइन को. जितना मैंने कमाया था पिछले 1.5-2 साल में, सब गवा दिया. So if you build relationships, if you understand how your service providers are, they will give you a solution. Listen to your service provider. Every few months, okay? If you ask me, as an organization, we have an advisory which goes out to a customer at least one a week. However, with specific customers, and this is what I've seen multinationals do, right? So if you have a multinational, they do a great job about this. They will come and they will listen to the service provider. They will ask you 10 questions. They will really value your advice. And in a lot of organizations, we don't give this advice free of cost. It's chargeable, but they really value it. Listen to your service provider. They are the ones who are doing things day in and day out. Build loyalty. Don't work on a transactional relationship. If you are loyal to your customer will be loyal to you. I'll tell you, I had a transaction in 2011. There was an exhibition. Every year there's an exhibition that takes place called SMM. We had a customer whose cargo, and that time there was two vessels in Nhava Sheva in the outer anchorage. They collided, and because they collided, the vessel got delayed. Our container would have gotten delayed by 10 days and would have sailed and reached there late. You will not believe, we put it on an alternate service. We flew to Germany. We stayed there at our cost for 3 cubic meters for 5 days to make sure that the warehouse, so the cargo was received, the cargo arrived on Friday night at 2300 in Europe. At 9 in the morning, where we could do an operation for 200 or maybe 400 euros, we called for a special truck. We called for a warehouse to be opened. We paid 2000 euros instead of 200 euros. We were there on the ground for the exhibition. When the shipment cleared, we took the exhibition to the site. We made sure that the same was accepted. Now, if it was a transactional relationship, they would have just said, sorry, we can't do anything. Hence, these are 6 tips, actually 5 tips, okay, for you to have successful logistics. I therefore request you follow these 5 steps. Take control of your logistics. If you take control of your logistics, you will sleep peacefully. You will not have challenges. Yes, there may be a little bit hiccups, vessel missing here, there, but you will not have exceptional challenges in current and in future times. And last and most important, be transparent. Let me tell you, most exporters we have seen are not completely transparent. We are the gurus. You know, so if you go to a doctor, imagine going to a doctor and say, doctor, fever, tell me what I have. The doctor has to check what you are. He will ask you how long you've had it, how many days you've had it, what are the symptoms, and then by his experience and by his training, he will effectively isolate what is the case, and he will draw down to what your actual problem is. If you are not familiar with the service provider, how will they teach you? How will they actually things further? Okay, how will they give you advice? I'll tell you, I have just last week, I had a client who called and said, this is a particular process I want, and I want to switch bill of lading. So I said, okay, you want to switch bill of lading. Why do you want to switch bill of lading? I don't know. Then I explained to them, why they don't need one. Now imagine saving $150 or $200 every transaction. If they do 500 transactions a year, that's the kind of money you make. This is extremely why it's very important to deal and manage your logistics effectively. I personally love cartoons and I love my childhood. Therefore, I also teach with cartoons, but I will leave you with only one statement. Okay, and this is something that I request each of you to carry. A lot of times we cry and we are negative. We are always, negative about what is going on around us. So in this, I learned from Snoopy, which is a dog, where Charlie Brown tells Snoopy saying that we live only once, Snoopy. And a dog is supposed to be less smarter than a human. So the dog turns around and says, wrong, we die only once, but we live every single day. It is very relevant for you to bounce back if there are problems and challenges. And the only way you will do it is with good governance. So with that, I come to a formal conclusion of my presentation. However, I'll just give you a brief about us as an organization. So as a group, we have 3 companies mainly. So MCC Contractor and MCC Container Lines are our traditional businesses where we do freight forwarding and custom clearance. We've been around for 4 decades, as I have mentioned. Freight forwarding, we've been doing only for about 2 decades. technology has been a passion. We created a complete automation solution where starting from exports, a lot of exporters make documents in Excel, and for every update you have to ask the customer, or you have to ask a service provider. Then they are busy, or you are busy, and then there's a lot of communication which goes back and forth. We've built a tech solution to completely automate the space. So starting from when you give a document for the checklist approval, going to for the shipment going on board or container going in gate, we have a mobile app. So how Amazon will give you an update for your package every stage, we have done that to export clearance and also in imports, where we have a lot of automation solutions. So like for example, if you don't file a bill of entry in imports, there is a late filing. So if it's not filed, then automatically the software will send you an email and tell you that you are at risk to incur additional expenses. If you have a shipment going to go into detention tomorrow, the software will send you an email saying that your shipment is going to detention tomorrow. And most importantly, what we pride ourselves by, we have zero visibility in terms of logistics and supply chain today, right? We get DSRs which are there on a daily basis, which are anywhere between 4 and 16 hours delayed. With CTrack, you will have a live update. So if something has happened 3 seconds ago, you will be able to see the update. So I thank you very, very much for being such a patient audience. I would like to thank once again Drip Capital for having me here and being with you. I hope you have enjoyed this session. My contact details are available on the last slide. You can follow me on LinkedIn as well. And if you have any thoughts, comments, you can even follow our newsletter. Thank you very much, Ms. D'Souza. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Contractor. It was a very nice session. We see a lot of tips that have come in. We'll open the floor for question and answer, Q&A. If you have to ask a question, please raise your hand. If you're watching us live on YouTube, I would suggest please type your question in the chat section and we'll take it up here. We'll just give it a moment to see any hand raise. Okay, so we have the first question from Mr. Ankit Mishra. Sir, can you please unmute yourself? Mr. Ankit, can you unmute yourself? Okay, we'll move on to the next person. Mr. Gautam, could you please unmute yourself, sir?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Gautam.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'm from West Bengal. Hello.
Yes, sir,
Yes,
we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from West Bengal and I'm into rice industry for last 20-25 years. Right now in West Bengal, the quantity and the quality that the market is looking I have, but I'm unable to export to that volume because of high cost of ocean freight from West Bengal port. So what best solution that I can get?
May I take that, Ms. D'Souza?
Yes, sir.
So, you are asking for, you have a magic ball, right? And you're asking to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So, rice, so definitely capacities across the East Coast have been a challenge. However, let me tell you, sir, rice is moving in a large way. India is exporting rice like there's no shortage. A lot of it is moving break bulk. So if containerization is proving to be more expensive, bulk is an option for you. So that's one significant thing. And from the East Coast and West Coast of India, there is probably a vessel every other day. So that's an option, sir. Thank you.
We'll take the next question from Mr. Kushang from SV Exports. So can you please unmute yourself?
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you, Drip, and thank you, Mr. Contractor, for doing this session. It was very helpful. I have one small, very very particular question for Mr. Contractor. Sir, we are merchant exporters from Gujarat, and we've been exporting agri commodities to Gulf, specifically Dubai. right? And we have exported to our buyer in the month of November and December. Now we have our ECGC policy on our buyer. Our buyer is credit, he's credit covered by ECGC. There has been payment delays for almost a month now. So my buyer has offered me to, because he is traveling because of health reasons and he cannot make payment from his company, he has asked me to, make a payment from another company from Dubai. Now that company has not been mentioned in the invoice that I have raised in a notify party or anything as such. So is there any way possible in customs where I talked to my bank. My bank says that if you can make the amendment with the customs, we can accept this third party payment and we can clear the, we can knock off the BRC accordingly. So is there any particular way for already shipment that has been made? The buyer has accepted. There is nothing like he has not accepted. We need to shift the goods to, other buyer or anything as such. But is there any particular way where we can, from customs, where we can get such kind of permissions?
Thank you for asking such a wonderful question, because this is, a common problem in recent times. Yes, there is a possibility. You have the ability to approach CEAC. So wherever you exported from, you ask the custom broker to carry out an amendment. So there is a section 149 amendment which is available to you. You need to explain the actual details of your case, and it will be done. If you have any difficulties or if you need any specific questions around that, I'll be happy to take it offline.
Okay, so section 149, that is what you said, right?
Yes. Which port have you exported from?
We export from Mundra.
Yeah, so you can ask your custom broker. Your custom broker would be able to help you with that.
Okay, maybe I'll contact you then with your contact details. If you can put it down in the chat, maybe. Yes, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll share the contact details in the chat, Mr. Kushal.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the next question from Mr. Melvis Patado. Sir, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, Mr. Patado.
Hey Tej, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Melvis.
It was a pleasure to see you in Dubai for the SEPA event. And just to cut the story, the question is, you covered all the points, but you know that Dubai is one of the countries which we don't have CHAs. It's purely a freight forwarder driven. So in terms of compliance, which you agree, so the question is, how do I find sitting in Dubai compliant LSP in Tanzania, which I'm struggling?
Yeah. So that's a superb question, Melvis, and it's always a pleasure seeing you. So, see, typically, like every trade bodies are recognized by most government administrations. So you can deal with someone who is registered with the Tanzanian Custom Broking Authority, or you could find someone who's registered with the Tanzanian Freight Forwarding Association. So it's not just Dubai. So I mean, typically in India also you have same organization doing custom broking and freight forwarding. The only difference is that the level of compliance is slightly higher. So if you connect with the Freight Forwarding Association there, you should not have a problem. If you have any difficulties, just message me. I'll get you somebody who can help you with the matters.
Thanks, Tej, for the wonderful answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patado. I think that was the last question. We'll take another minute. If anyone has another question, please raise your hand and we'll take that up.
So there is one question that was there in the chat. Could I answer that question?
Yes, please go ahead.
So Nikita Anandani asked a question saying, when will RODDEP start for EOUs and for the advance authorization? So let me tell you, RODDEP is a duty remission scheme. That means anything that was there in incidence of export. So let's say I'm wearing this shirt or we have this headphone, right? If it is going to come into India, if the parts are going to come into India, and if they are going to be basically made into the final product, if there was duty incurred on that at the time of import or in the time of manufacture. So let's say these buttons were bought, they were imported by some guy who imported plastic, and they were bought from another raw material supplier to somebody else, and there was some small percentage of duty incurred. That cost sheet has to be submitted to the government, and effectively that is something that you can get back. from the government. In case of a EOU and in case of an advance authorization, you are already exempt from duty. Therefore, RODDEP will never be applicable to you. I hope I was able to answer your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Contractor. Okay, we see one more hand raised by Mr. C. Amblavan Chimmaswamy. So can you please unmute yourself? Hello, Mr. Chinnaswamy, could you ask a question?
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Sir, we are having a, export order through one of our buyers, and they are supplying to one of the big international supply chain store, and they have the nominated forwarder who is issuing only the FCR, and we are not able to meet the LC terms stipulation. In those cases, is it advisable to go for the swift bill of lading? We will get the bill of lading in favor of our agent, or who is sourcing from us, and then later on they can give the FCR to the ultimate big store.
No, sir. Sorry. Can you just explain explain once again?
Yeah, sir, we are dealing with one buyer.
Okay, your buyer is in country in which country? USA. Okay.
USA,
okay.
And they are supplying to a store in Mexico.
They are supplying to a store in Mexico.
Mexico.
So your order is received from USA.
Yeah, order received from USA.
And going to Mexico.
Goods are produced in India. Goods are exported from India. Goods are consigned to Mexico.
Okay. Now you are doing this under a letter of credit.
Yes, that is the issue now. And a letter of credit is having some consignee to and all that notify as per our buyers.
Irrelevant. That's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
But the ultimate, the consignee, the big store is having an SOP with the forwarder, their nominated forwarder, and based on that SOP, that forwarder is giving one document. We are not able to fulfill the LC terms. So in these cases,
the document they're issuing is a forwarder cargo receipt, right?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, okay. Since it is a big store and they are having worldwide this one, and
that's okay. Doesn't matter. Now you are the exporter or you are subcontracting for that?
No, we are the exporter. In our name only, shipping bills are filed, and we are sending the goods to Mexico in our name with shipping bill, everything in our name. The parties in USA is just making the payment through the LC.
So you can request the buyer to amend the amend the letter of credit.
Yeah.
That is one possibility. The second possibility is that you can request the forwarder to issue a document. Okay. See, everyone is governed by. There is nothing called a swift bill of lading. First of all. So at least I'm yet to come across a swift bill of lading. There is an electronic bill of lading.
No. One second, sir. See, I thought if we are getting a bill of lading with consignee to our buyer USA, and if the same bill of lading can be surrendered to the forwarder again by our buyer in USA, so that he will get a fresh FCR favoring the ultimate store where we are sending the goods. Is it the correct way?
Yeah.
No.
I would not advise. I would personally think that you should just request the logistics company to honor the letter of credit.
Okay.
The conditions on the credit at this moment. Mr. Vijayan, yes, he's asking for a switch bill of lading, but I would not advise to use a switch bill of lading in these transactions. A switch bill of lading should be used only when you know what you're doing. And unfortunately, with due respect, a lot of people don't understand the legalities or something that they would enter in. That's
Okay.
why this is done. But just ask for the LC to be amended, or ask
Yeah.
the forwarder to give you a bill of lading. That should be sufficient.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, thank you, Chimaswamy, for that question. I guess that was the last question that we have for today. Thank you, Mr. College. Thank you to all our viewers for joining us and being an excellent audience in this webinar. You will receive a short survey once we end this session. Request you all to share your valuable feedbacks and topic you want to hear from us. It's very important for us to know what you want to know about, and it will further help us organize similar sessions in the coming future. You may also follow us on social media to stay in touch with Drip Capital. You can follow our blogs and newsletter for recent trade updates and insight on foreign trade related matters. In case you want to go back to this webinar or any of the previous webinar, please visit our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to it. We have shared the link in the chat section right now. Please have a great evening and stay safe. Thank you, Mr. Contractor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sousa, and thanks to the audience for being asking so many good, interesting questions. And you can always connect with me offline if you require it.
Yeah, Mr. Contractor, we look forward to doing more insightful sessions with you like these in the future.
Sure, it'll be a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.